Ms. Clara Evans was the kind of teacher every child secretly hoped for. Firm but fair, with eyes that noticed what others overlooked. At 35, she carried both authority and warmth, her passion for teaching driven by a quiet belief that education could heal wounds no one else could see. Before we jump in, show some love with a like and comment. It helps us create even more stories for you. Now let's get into it. In her class sat Lucas Ramirez, a 10-year-old boy who rarely spoke, his notebooks neat but strangely empty of joy. His silence often made him invisible among his louder classmates. At home, Lucas lived with his father, Daniel Ramirez, a once gifted art teacher now weakened by illness and burdened by poverty. Their small apartment reflected struggle, but also a quiet dignity, and a bond between father and son forged through resilience. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Ms. Clara Evans stayed behind after class, sorting through stacks of homework left on her desk. Most of the papers were filled with half-finished math problems or doodles of superheroes in the margins. But when she reached Lucas Ramirez's notebook, something unusual caught her attention. A page had been folded neatly, tucked deeper inside as if it wasn't meant to be found. Curiosity tugged at her, and she carefully opened it. At first glance, it looked like any child's sketch, but the longer Clara stared, the more her chest tightened. The drawing wasn't playful or carefree. Instead, it was haunting. A small boy sat in a corner with tears streaming down his face. Behind him, a refrigerator stood wide open, its shelves empty. A figure lay in bed nearby, frail and thin, with a shadow of sickness hovering above. Clara's throat went dry. She knew instantly this was no ordinary drawing. It was a reflection of Lucas's reality. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the pencil strokes that carried more weight than words ever could. Her heart ached. Lucas had never complained, never asked for help, never even hinted that his life at home was this hard. He was just the quiet boy who turned in his work, smiled faintly when spoken to, and disappeared into the crowd. Clara placed her hand gently on the paper, as though it were a fragile secret entrusted to her. For the first time in years of teaching, she felt truly unprepared. She wasn't just looking at a child's art. She was staring straight into his pain, and she knew from that moment on, she could not simply ignore it. That night, long after the classroom lights had dimmed, Ms. Clara couldn't stop thinking about the drawing. She sat at her kitchen table, the folded page lying in front of her, its pencil lines etched into her memory. As a teacher, she had always told herself to care, but not too much. Teachers came and went, she reasoned. Crossing boundaries could complicate things. Yet this time felt different. Every detail in Lucas's sketch whispered something he never dared to say aloud. The empty fridge screamed hunger. The weakened figure in bed revealed illness. The boy's tears, so carefully shaded, spoke of loneliness too heavy for a child his age. Clara realized the picture wasn't just art. It was a desperate cry for help hidden in plain sight. But what gnawed at her most was Lucas himself. He had never acted out, never asked for pity, never sought attention. He carried his silence like a shield, and that shield had fooled everyone, even her. Clara thought of how often she'd praised louder, more confident students, while Lucas quietly faded into the background. Her heart ached with guilt. How many times had she overlooked him? How many mornings had he walked into her classroom carrying invisible burdens no one noticed? Clara clasped the paper to her chest. At that moment, she knew she faced a choice: remain the kind of teacher who taught lessons and marked grades, or become the kind of teacher who stepped beyond the lesson plan into the fragile, messy reality of her student's life. And though fear gnawed at her, one truth was undeniable. She could never look at Lucas the same way again. The next morning, Clara found herself watching Lucas more closely than ever before. He sat at the back of the classroom, shoulders hunched, pencil moving slowly across his page. From the outside, he looked like any other quiet child, but now Clara knew better. She saw the weight in his small frame, the way his eyes carried shadows that no 10-year-old should know. During recess, she tried to approach him gently. "Lucas," she said softly, crouching to his level, "your drawing was mighty. Do you want to talk about it?" His eyes widened, and for a moment panic flickered across his face. Then quickly, he shook his head and pulled his notebook closer as if to shield it. "It's just a picture, miss. Nothing real." His voice was low, guarded. Clara's heart twisted. She recognized the fear, not fear of her, but fear of being exposed. Poverty often came with shame, and Lucas had wrapped himself tightly in it. Later that day, in the teacher's lounge, Clara confided in a colleague about her discovery. Instead of support, she was met with caution. "Clara, be careful," another teacher warned. "You can't solve every student's problem. If you get too involved, it'll drain you, or worse, backfire. These families have their own lives." But Clara couldn't shake the image of the empty fridge from her mind. That night, she drove past the neighborhood where Lucas lived. The buildings were worn down, their windows dim. She saw Lucas through a cracked curtain, sitting at a small table with his father, a single candle flickering between them. No laughter, no abundance, just survival. Clara gripped the steering wheel, torn. Was it her place to step into their world? She wanted to help, but fear gnawed at her. What if Lucas resented her? What if she crossed a line she couldn't return from? The battle raged inside her, between professional distance and human compassion. And as she stared at that fragile home, she realized the most brutal truth of all. Doing nothing would break her heart even more than the risk of doing something. Clara finally decided she couldn't remain a bystander. One Friday afternoon, she asked Lucas if she could walk him home. He hesitated, eyes darting nervously, but after a moment he nodded. The walk was quiet, his small steps shuffling beside her until they reached a weathered apartment building. Inside, Clara met Daniel Ramirez, Lucas's father. He was thin, pale, and moved with effort, though his eyes still carried a certain dignity. When Clara introduced herself, he smiled faintly. "You're Lucas's teacher," he said. "He talks about you." Clara's gaze shifted to the small living room where sketches covered the table, detailed portraits, landscapes, and unfinished works. Her eyes widened. "You're an artist," she whispered. Daniel chuckled softly, though it was tinged with sorrow. "I was once. I taught art at the community college. However, when I fell ill, I had to stop. Work, money, health, they all disappeared. Art became a memory." Suddenly, the truth struck her. The raw talent in Lucas's hidden drawing wasn't just a child's instinct, it was a legacy. Lucas's sketch wasn't random. He attempted to carry forward his father's unspoken voice. The realization washed over Clara. She wasn't just dealing with a poor boy's struggles, but a family bound by art, silenced by hardship. Lucas's picture had been more than a cry for help. It was a bridge between his father's lost world and his own future. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. The decision before her was no longer about charity. It was about giving both father and son a way to reclaim something they thought was gone forever. As Clara walked home that evening, her mind replayed everything she had seen. The fragile man with gentle eyes, the stack of forgotten sketches, and the boy whose silence spoke louder than words. It was then she realized this story wasn't only about poverty. It was about voices lost and found, about the invisible wealth people carried inside them even when the world dismissed them as poor. The theme of compassion beyond the classroom echoed strongly. Teaching, she thought, wasn't about textbooks or exams. It was about seeing what others refused to see and daring to step into the silence. Lucas had drawn what he couldn't say. Clara's role was to listen without judgment. Another theme was the power of art as a silent form of communication. Lucas's sketch had done what words failed to do. It revealed hunger, loneliness, and resilience, all in a single page. It reminded Clara that wealth wasn't always measured by financial means. Sometimes it was the ability to create beauty amidst struggle. Then there was the redefinition of wealth and poverty. Daniel, though financially poor, was rich in talent and in the bond he shared with his son. Lucas, though burdened, had inherited a gift that could one day change his future. Clara herself began to see that her own wealth wasn't her salary or stability. It was her ability to invest compassion where it mattered most. Ultimately, these themes wove together into a truth that stirred Clara deeply. Real teaching meant planting seeds of hope, not just knowledge. And sometimes it was the students who reminded teachers of life's most important lessons. In the following weeks, Clara began weaving subtle changes into her classroom. She gave Lucas quiet encouragement, praising not just his neat answers, but the sketches he sometimes tried to hide. "You have a gift," she whispered one day, placing his notebook back on his desk. For the first time, he met her eyes with a flicker of pride. But Clara wanted more than whispered words. She approached the principal with an idea, an art showcase where students could present their creative work. At first, the idea was dismissed as unnecessary. Yet Clara persisted, framing it not as an event for talent, but as a celebration of student voices. Reluctantly, approval was given. When the night of the showcase arrived, the small school auditorium was filled with parents and children. Paintings, collages, and simple crafts lined the walls. Among them hung Lucas's drawings, carefully chosen, mounted on colored paper. Daniel sat in the front row, leaning heavily on his cane, his eyes glistening. As the evening unfolded, whispers spread through the crowd. People marveled at the depth in Lucas's work, his shading, his detail, his ability to capture emotion far beyond his years. Daniel bowed his head, overwhelmed. For once, his illness didn't define him. Pride did. When Lucas shyly stepped onto the stage to accept recognition, the applause thundered. His eyes searched for Clara, and when he found her, a small, unguarded smile spread across his face. Clara realized then that her role had never been about saving them. It was about reminding Lucas and Daniel of the richness they already possessed within themselves. And in doing so, she rediscovered her own purpose, the reason she became a teacher in the first place. This heartwarming story of Ms. Clara Evans, a devoted teacher, and her student Lucas Ramirez reminds us that true wealth lies not in possessions but in compassion and connection. What began as a simple discovery, a hidden drawing inside a notebook, became an emotional short story that revealed a family's silent struggles and resilience. Lucas's father, Daniel, once an artist, embodied the sacrifices of illness and poverty. Yet, his spirit lived on through his son's sketches. Through courage and persistence, Clara transformed from a teacher, marking homework, into an inspiring teacher story that touched lives beyond the classroom. By choosing to act, she broke through barriers of shame, poverty, and silence, proving that when a teacher helps a student, the impact extends to an entire family. In the end, the art showcase was more than an event. It was a testament to hope, dignity, and the strength that can be found in creativity. For Lucas, it meant being seen. For Daniel, it meant rediscovering pride. For Clara, it meant remembering that education is not just about lessons but about compassion. This story with a twist leaves us with one truth. Kindness, when shared, can change everything. If this touched your heart, hit like, share it with others, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Don't forget the notification bell. More inspiring content awaits in our playlist. Thank you and see you soon.